Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and today's going to be the mid-tier list for patch 7.37e, and let's just jump into the first hero, S tier, all by herself, which kind of makes everything else more crowded, but deservedly so, and that is Lina. And she was already decent last patch, but then just basically with a bunch of different nerfs, she became, and a buff to her actually, she became the best hero overall, and it's not even close. You go the magic damage build every single game on this hero, it's not a question. You have to go this build because literally, once you get a few items, you do like 3,000 damage. It's like absurd. Any hero with below like 2,500 HP just instantly dies to this hero. And that's because you just go straight Ags and Shard, and you just use your entire magic damage combo, and they just die. So if you didn't know, the Ags basically gives you this kind of like flying, kind of like Bat Rider thing for a short period of time. You get more magic resistance, which is good obviously, but really it's all about the spell amp and the max fiery soul stacks, and then the shard, which gives you more damage for your abilities. And you just basically go in, you could even Shadow Blade potentially and be invis while you're going in with this kind of like flying vision. Then you stun them, Dragon Slave them, Laguna Blade. You just use all of them together. Sometimes you might start with Laguna Blade and then stun them. I mean, sometimes, especially if you're invis, stun can be better, but you basically just use all of your spells together. They probably die in the full spell combo. Like, they're probably dead. If they're not dead, you can still click them. I mean, you still do decent right-click damage. You still have insane attack speed. And so you can literally just keep clicking them and they will probably die. You will literally kill any hero in the game unless they get, like, saved by Shadow Demon, or, you know, there has to be some kind of save on the enemy team, or else you will just one-shot the enemy hero that you're going on. That's pretty much just a guaranteed with this hero. It's absolutely absurd. And then once you get into the later portion of the game, you can keep amping up that magic damage with like Kaya, with E-Blade, all that kind of stuff. And then, you know, after you finish those items, you can get some right-click damage. I mean, going for that Shadow Blade and then upgrading that is some right-click damage, and that's sort of a right-click item. So you can just keep, you know, scaling up into the late game with more right-click items later, and so this hero just never falls off, does insane damage, and is just absurd right now. And obviously in the laning stage, she has good attack range, decent attack speed, good nukes for securing CS, all the things you want. She can gank. She just does everything right now, and it's kind of absurd and just way overpowered with where the numbers are. So that's Lina. That's why she's just all alone at the top. Plus, a lot of the S tier heroes from before did get nerfed, and now they're in A tier. So moving on to A tier, we have the heroes from before that were very, very good. We have Puck, and this hero is still good, just not as good as it once was. I think got some nerfs in the last patch. So it does everything that Puck has been doing, you know, has a pseudo right click, but then also does magic damage, very hard to kill, very good ganker, all the same things that Puck has been doing for a while. There's really nothing super new about this hero. And if anything, honestly, I would say Puck is the one hero that could potentially be put in S tier along with Lina, just because Puck still has a great win rate, still has a very high pick rate, and it's kind of right up there with Lina. But I think Lina just deserves to be on this tier alone. And then we have Storm Spirit. Hero is also still very good, but they fixed the broken part of the hero, which was, if you didn't know, when you get the shard, I think it was with the talent, or maybe it was just the shard itself, ended up dealing like double damage compared to what it was supposed to, and they basically fixed that. So it was a kind of a nerf, but it was a fix because it was broken. It wasn't supposed to be like that. But overall, the hero still does kind of what it did before. It's just not broken like it was because of that part of the actual kit that was broken. Yeah, I think it was level 25 and the shard combined or something like that was broken. So they did fix that. Otherwise, still a very good hero for all the same reasons it was good before. Has that passive where it's gaining all that regen. The laning is still very good with the facet that allows you to push like the remnants in a certain direction and stuff like that. Everything is still basically the same with Storm, so just very, very good. Same thing with Queen of Pain, still very good laner, still can just go straight in for the Dagon and just go for like Dagon 5 and just do insane damage, and then just buy some like BKB and other amp up items with this like amp to her spell damage. Actually, in a way, she was the better version of Lina until this patch, and now Lina is kind of the better version of Queen of Pain in a lot of ways. They kind of do right click damage, but then just are heavily burst focused, and so that's kind of what Queen of Pain is. Then we have Earthshaker, very good hero, just deleting people, does insane damage. You can go straight in for Blink and Ags. And I think the biggest thing that makes this hero more viable now is that like slugger facet where you actually send the creeps that you kill off in a direction. It's kind of hilarious, but it actually is very good for laning. And so I think maybe you've seen the clip probably if you're paying attention. Maybe you haven't. But there's a clip of a pro game. I think it's Nisha or someone. I can't remember if Nisha was on the Earthshaker or Nisha was killed, I think. Or maybe it was Quinn. Anyway, the point is like the Earthshaker hits and kills 3 creeps all at the same time, and they all go flying into the enemy mid, and the enemy mid just like is deleted. It's actually really good in the mid lane. That like allows us here to actually be a legitimate mid laner with the harass damage, almost like a TA, because you kind of line up killing the creep with your totem to actually like hit the enemy and splash in a similar way that TA would. And so I think that makes this hero really viable in the mid, and then it's very good overall in general, doing a ton of damage. And then that right click damage is absurd, honestly, going in later into the game. Then Invoker, it's not my favorite hero. I don't love Invoker, but Invoker's just pretty good right now with the laning stage that is just better than a lot of heroes in terms of you get so much damage on your right click and you get experience from denies, which means you just can dominate the lane. I think going into like the mid and late game, I mean, late game, this hero can be a beast. The mid game is a little bit awkward, especially at, you know, pub MMRs where you're just kind of running around. Like, do you really want to go the right click build or the Midas build? That can feel like you're just farming. But then it can also feel weird to go from that more like tornado EMP stuff because your team doesn't really play around that as much. So I think in pubs it can be a little bit awkward, but it is a very good hero overall because of that dominant laning stage with the denies and everything and the amped up damage. And then later in the game, getting the Ags, doing decent right clicks, all that kind of stuff. Very good hero overall. And then Earth Spirit was, I think, really, really good. I think got small nerfs and is still very good, but just not broken like it was. It's not getting picked every single game and just being spammed a ton like it was in the past, but it can roam, do all the same stuff it did before, has decent right click with the ult, can bring people down with the ult in team fights and just roam a bunch. I think the big problem with the hero is it doesn't scale as well in the late game, so if you are picking it in your pubs, it can just be a very all-in hero where you just have to make tons of rotations and kill a lot of people early. Now, it does scale better than it used to, don't get me wrong. I mean, that's kind of why it can be a mid these days, but it's, you know, you're just not going to scale nearly as well on an Earth Spear compared to a lot of other heroes. Then we have Monkey King. This hero is a very good mid, basically playing carry from the mid, but you can dominate a lot of matchups, like a lot of melee matchups you can dominate. You can even survive pretty well against a lot of ranged matchups these days, but overall, you're really playing carry from the mid, but I think it's a better mid because you don't love going like Battle Fury or straight farming items on the hero. You like going more fighting items, running around the map, and the real reason it can do that is because of the cooldown on its Primal Spring, I believe that's what it is, or like the tree dance, the tree jump thing. So you're jumping from the trees, and you're doing that like on such a low cooldown that you can be super mobile on the map and just get from lane to lane extremely quickly, gank very well, and then you kind of transition into a carry when you buy fighting items and stuff early, and that's pretty much how the hero works. Then we have Phoenix. This is a little bit of a cheese pick. That's kind of why I put it on the end here. And it's not getting picked a ton, but it is getting more and more popular. And it is a hero I think that can do a ton of damage and be very, very effective. But it is matchup dependent in some way. And also you have to be a bit of a specialist in Phoenix to be good at the hero. And the reason why I say it's matchup dependent is because you do have to be against heroes that don't like to fight into the egg or don't have good ways of purging your slows or other things like that. Like there are certain matchups where you just egg and you just instantly die, no matter even if it's level 3. But there are games where the right clickers aren't the best and the carries don't like have the fastest right click or whatever other thing, or they can't get into the egg very well or whatever other thing that is a very good matchup. And then once you get to those higher levels, you would just absolutely melt them. Or it's a very good matchup mid where you can just burn the enemy down with like this magic damage that can be overwhelming. I've seen Phoenixes absolutely stomp mid because people aren't really used to playing against it, and you can underestimate how much damage this hero does once it gets like 3 or 4 levels. Then we have Huskar, kind of on the rise as a hero, and it's definitely a cheese pick, obviously, but if you look at the win rate and the pick rate, it's getting pretty popular right now. It does all the same things that Huskar does. I think the biggest thing is that the change with the mana is not really a huge deal. That's not really that relevant. It's kind of like weird, but not having any mana, what does that really do for the hero? It's more that the Q is now a silence rather than a disarm, which can be very good in some situations, very bad in others. If you're against a puck, that can be extremely good. If you're against a hero like, let's say, PA, and you're trying to kill a PA, that's obviously not very good. So it just depends on the matchups. And then it doesn't really change how the hero buys items and stuff, but it just does make the hero in some ways a little bit better in the lane against a lot of these heroes that do rely on spells like Lina, Puck, Storm, Queen, all those kinds of heroes that the silence can really pick off and kill them. And then later into the game, it's very good against them too, so they have to be more careful. So it's almost like you're more of a counter for these mid heroes and these spell casting heroes and supports than it is you're a counter or you're able to deal with the carries. You have to be more careful of the carries kind of jumping in on you and killing you, and you have to be, but you're more effective against these spellcasters and stuff until they get BKB. So it is more of an all-in hero in that way, which I kind of like in some sense in the design conceptual ways, but it is on the upswing. It is a pretty good cheese hero. Then we have Lone Druid, Meepo, and Visage, and I'm just putting these all up here because the win rates and the pick rates are pretty low, but the win rates are pretty good when they are picked. And if you're a specialist and if you can play them and if you know what you're doing, I think you can stomp games with them. So that's why they're up here. Really not too much else to comment on them. They just play the same way they always have. The Bear's pretty good. The Bear Necessities build is not really relevant. I would say you could probably go it, but not a huge relevancy right now as it was maybe, 4 months ago. Meepo still very good for all the same things. It always is done. Ganks, farms, has the Mega Meepo, all that kind of stuff. Visage just can dominate early game. Honestly, this hero feels broken a lot of the times with its soul assumption. It feels like, how is it doing that much damage? It's absolutely absurd. And then the mid game can feel a little bit weird. Like if you snowball, you can absolutely destroy and like push, but then like maybe 20, 25, 30 minutes, it can feel weird. But if you do get to the later game portion, if you get a bunch of items, you can absolutely push so quickly and delete people. It can be very hard to deal with if you know what you're doing on Visage. Then for B tier, we kind of have standard mids here that are just a little bit worse than all these ones that were popular for a while, or the S tier Lina, obviously. And that's Ember Spirit. I think he's pretty good right now. He's just maybe a little bit worse than these guys. That's kind of why he's put down here. His pick rate and win rate is a little bit lower. Same thing with Void Spirit. These are, just your classic Spirit heroes. They're just not as good as they once were, or they're not as good as these other ones. That's why they're down a bit. There's nothing really special to say about them. They're decent. The facets are decent. The passives are decent, but they're not the best. Tiny, also a decent hero, but just not the best. You would rather have one of these other Spirit heroes, or maybe even an Earth Shaker or an Earth Spirit, than a Tiny. He's definitely fallen off compared to what he was before. I think with the nerfs from the last patch, he's actually a little bit better. Maybe I had him in C tier or something, or maybe even in D tier in the last patch, because he was just like not picked at all. But people are realizing, wait, this hero is actually still pretty good. You actually still do burst damage, and it's still a decent hero overall. Then Magnus. This hero is actually kind of becoming a carry, kind of becoming a mid where you do a ton of damage. It's at a weird spot because it can play all three roles, but it doesn't play all three roles like exceptionally well. Like there's no one role where it's like, this is Magnus's dominant role and the other ones aren't as good. It's almost like he plays all three at a B tier level or so. And so yeah, it just does the same thing that Magnus has always done, in the sense that you have this great ultimate that you don't necessarily have to rely on because you can skewer people out of position. You can use the shard, all that kind of stuff. You also farm extremely quickly. You farm stacks, all those kinds of things. You can gank if you want to. Once you do get 6, you can even gank with your skewer. So it has all those advantages, but it can be taken advantage of in the mid lane by some matchups. Sometimes if you don't get a ton of farm, you can feel like an underwhelming right clicker compared to a bunch of other right clickers. You don't necessarily right click as well as Monkey King, and you don't gank as well as a lot of these other Spirit heroes. So it's just like middling at all the things, but decent at them. So it's not like you're griefing. Then Pango, this here just feels like it's always hanging around as a decent hero. The double jump is pretty good. The like spin, the turn rate thing is pretty good. They changed the way that the spells work, I don't know, maybe a few patches ago or whatever, where they do physical damage and stuff, and that's pretty good now, but sometimes can be taken advantage of in the laning stage. Is very reliant on ganking to actually get kills. You can farm a decent bit, but it's not like, I feel like it's Magnus in this way, where you have this good team fight, you can do good damage, you have an okay lane, but you're not amazing at anything, so it's just right there in the B tier. Sand King has definitely fallen off with a bunch of nerfs since it was like S tier, mid and off lane. They nerfed the AoE, they nerfed some damage, they nerfed a bunch of things like this. So, the Bloodstone build is not as good as it once was. People are going more for the Invis, which is good in some ways, but it's not like that OP running around with a permanent radiance on like it used to be. I think the cooldown is less, so there's actually more of a time when you don't have Sandstorm up as well. So there's just a bunch of things that have made this hero worse. So it's still viable, it's just not broken like it was. Primal Beast, very strong hero. You can cut waves, you can get your farm, you can gank a lot, but can be taken advantage of in lane like a lot of these other melee heroes can be. As a mid laner that's melee, it's just like the only ones that you really like right now are Monkey King and Earthshaker. These other ones just feel worse because of all the matchups that they're going against these days. And also, again, another one that's relying on ganking a lot to farm and to have impact. And if you're just AFK, this hero doesn't feel that great. Zeus is kind of the opposite of these melee guys. You're just like all in on damage. You have a decent lane, and you can rotate or, you alt and stuff like that. But then you kind of are just sitting in the back and just killing people with your damage. That's all you're really doing. You don't provide a lot of lockdown. You don't provide a lot of control. Like at least something like Monkey King has a stun. Storm has a stun. They all have this stun, like Lina, insane burst damage, but also has a stun. you don't really provide anything else other than the damage. Like that mini stun or whatever, okay, it cancels TPs, but like that's not a huge deal. So that's kind of why this hero is just not as good. You'd rather have Alina, obviously. Then Kez, I put Kez B tier everywhere pretty much because this hero is decent, I think, at mid and carry. We'll see. Again, I kind of commented on this in the carry tier list that I think this hero might be A or actually way better than we think. Yes, it got nerfs, and people are like, it's dead now. It definitely isn't dead. And I still think that people playing the hero in a stupid way is making the hero have a win rate that is just around average, but actually it's probably very good. Like if everyone played it correctly and knew what the right build was, which I don't even know that we really have that fully ironed out, then I think this hero would be broken, or at least A tier, if not S. So I still have that opinion. I still think this hero is great. If you see it in a game where somebody knows what they're doing and they have experience and it's not like their third game on the hero, they will stomp the game, like almost every time. It feels like it's very night and day with this hero. You have here people that are playing it and they're new and they don't know what they're doing and they suck, or they're playing it, they have 30, 40 games on it, 50 games, and they just will literally solo carry the game. And that's like the kind of night and day, black and white with the hero. Then we have cheese heroes like Brood and Arc. Fine, but I think these cheese heroes are a little bit better, but there's nothing super special or new to say about them. They're just kind of fine, middle of the road. Then we have C tier. And we have Timbersaw here. I was debating potentially putting Timbersaw maybe in B tier. I think he could deserve B tier. I do think this hero is one of those heroes that if you are good with him, if you know what you're doing, you can just run around the map ganking people at level 6 or whatever and just absolutely obliterating people, taking over the game, being impossible to kill, and doing ridiculous pure damage and magic damage. But just at like higher level Dota, when people understand how to take advantage of him, or if you're not the best Timber player, he's not as good. The win rate is not that great. So that's why I think he deserves C tier in terms of like looking at it statistically. But overall, like just you could say that this hero's very all or nothing depending on how good you are. And I think he maybe would deserve a higher ranking if you were like, I've seen this hero just stomp games. So that's kind of, like I said, it's matchup dependent. It's all about the player skill. C tier might be a little bit low, but that's what the statistics say. Then we have Kunkka, just I think an okay hero right now. A lot worse since they took away the Ags and they made it the fleet, and that's just kind of where he's been. But you can get away with it if like you don't need very much damage at all and you just need control. He can still provide that for you from the mid lane. If you have a carry off lane or something like that. Viper, very slow hero, kind of goes all in on damage. You would rather just have Alina or something, but provides that break that's like reliable, which is good against a lot of heroes these days. But you don't want to be picking a mid just for that. Also has a kind of awkward stage where you're not the best ganker. You kind of are just farming, but you're not the best farmer. But if you do get to a late game portion where you have a bunch of items, this hero like is amazing once you hit 25. It's just kind of weird picking a mid to play for level 25. That's just awkward. And then TA is a farming carry from the mid, kind of. I mean, you'd just rather pick like Monkey King or someone that can actually do stuff more. That's the problem with this hero. Again, just really a carry from the mid. And that's kind of the same problem with OD. You kind of are a carry from the mid. Sure, you can gank. You can like Astral and ult somebody. You can Astral and ult the mid laner that you're up against. But otherwise, you're not doing stuff on the map like these heroes, which is why these kind of heroes can be very, very good at low MMRs. But if your team requires somebody to do something, like you don't really start the fight. Sure, you can Astral someone, but this isn't the old days of the Meteor Hammer OD. That's not really a viable build anymore. So you're not really going to be fighting in this way. So that's why it's awkward. And then Dragon Knight, you can participate more. You can buy Blink. You can be this kind of carry from the mid that also participates, but it's just way better as a carry. It feels awkward because the reason this hero is good is to get that cleave, and that's more of the carry build. So you're going to get that still probably from the mid lane, but then it feels like you're very farm heavy. So it's just a little bit awkward from the mid or the off lane to play DK. You can still do it, still definitely viable. I would say don't go for the same carry build. You should probably go for Blink first and then go into carry items. You can, go Blink, BKB, and get like crit or SNY or whatever, but don't go like Armlet, don't go Mask of Madness. I feel like that's kind of grief. You can even go like Orchid and Bloodthorn. That's very good. I think like Blink Orchid would be very good on the hero. Then Bounty. This hero's just a support, but it's still very good. I mean, they did nerf it some, but it's good enough that it can still be played mid. It's just not the best mid. That's why it's C tier. So you can get away with it. It's just not the best. And it does all the same things that support Bounty does, but just kind of like better, faster. You can get more like actual carry items to go in and be more survivable, like in an early BKB and stuff like that. Then we have Necro. This hero is OP if you can get to your items. Kind of like Viper in this way. I almost put them as a similar kind of hero where like you're playing mid. The mid Necro is the one you want because it's the one that's able to get away with going for Boots of Travel and Radiance. So that's the big problem with this hero, is you want to get those 2 items because you want to be fast, you want to TP to lanes, you want to like farm and gank, and that's the way you do it with Boots of Travel, but you also want the Radiance because that helps you farm. It also makes you just do way more damage with the Radiance and your passive and all that kind of stuff, but that's not really a good timing for the hero. It's like the timing for the hero is once you get that 3rd, 4th item, like if you get Shivas and BKB and you have your Radiance and your Boots of Travel, now you're like getting into unkillable territory, or Eternal Shroud and, Shivas or something like that. Whatever it is that you need to build for that hero to become tanky, it's like once you get to that tanky point, then you have all this damage and you're tanky. That's when it's like absurd levels of just dominating the game. But that doesn't happen until you may have already lost the game. And that's the big problem with Necro. Then DP is kind of on the upswing. People are trying to figure out how to play this hero with like I feel like it's underrated right now. Like the win rate's not the best. The pick rate is not getting picked a ton, but it's kind of on the upswing. I feel like this hero is just a patch or 2 away from just popping off because it's not good enough that it will like, I think it's bad enough or seen as bad enough that it will get a buff sometime, but I don't think it's actually bad enough where that buff will do nothing. I think if it gets a buff or 2 in the next patch or so, it will like just rocket right up to A or S tier. I think it's one of those where it's just waiting for something to make it very good. I think Lena was kind of like that last patch. I mean, I think I maybe even put Lena C tier. Maybe I had her in B tier, but she was just like 1 buff away from being S tier. And that's, I think, where Death Prophet is at. Then Shadow Fiend. This hero, if you're going to play it mid, you're going to go the magic build, but it's just a worse version of these other magic damage heroes. Like it's a worse version of Lena, worse version of Queen of Pain. It can work, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't go for the right click build at all. You definitely go magic build, but it's just a little bit more awkward, not as good of a laning stage, not as good at controlling and all that kind of stuff. It's not as good. But if you do get items, if you can, solo kill people on the map early with your ultimate and get to those timings where you just like have an Ags and you delete people and your ult super quick, or even Refresher, you can carry the game with this magic Shadow Fiend, or at least carry the fights, and then just rely on maybe your carry to do the right click and push towers. So it is viable, it's just not that great. Then we have Alchemist. This hero's just decent right now. Best as a carry, but you can play him as a mid. You're kind of griefing, but you're kind of also playing like a TA or an OD, so that's why it's sort of viable. That's why I put it here. I just would say that you're just very, very greedy, obviously, because you're just going to be farming. Like, yes, you can use your stun in the lane to have a better lane, but you're not really going to use that stun early on to, go to the side lanes. You're going to want to farm. You're going to get your Radiance. You're going to do these other things. Maybe you'll go Radiance Blink, but that means you're not really participating till, 15 plus minutes or something like that, whatever the timing is that you're getting. You're probably not getting a ton of stacks unless you're at a good MMR. Your support's just amazing. So, for those first 15 minutes or whatever it is, your team just has to play alone. And that doesn't feel good when all these other heroes can farm, but also participate and kill heroes. And then Pudge is okay. You can definitely play this hero. You're relying a lot on hooks. You're relying a lot on snowballing, kind of like every patch, but it's not grief by any means. Then we have D tier. Leshrac has just fallen off a ton. Bloodstone is still a decent item, but it's not nearly as good as it was, I feel like, and it's kind of one of these things where these other heroes are picking it. And so Leshrac has just fallen off a ton since it was good for 2 years, and it's at the same place it was before, where they just nerfed it kind of into oblivion, and it hasn't really recovered. Who knows if they will buff it sometime here. It was one of those where I think it had a similar problem to what Faceless Void did, where it was so good for so long. When they came out with facets and passives, it didn't really get too much love. If anything, it got nerfed that time, and that was huge and detrimental to the hero, so it kind of fell off a lot since that. Wind Ranger as a mid, it's just not good as a hero, really, and since they nerfed the facet that was deleting everybody in the AoE. I know I say that for the carry version too, but it's the same thing as a mid. It's just that the hero wasn't good, and then people realized that facet was broken, then they started playing it, it got nerfed, and now it's dead again. Then we have Razor. I think this hero is just, it's just very awkward. I'd rather play it as an off lane. I think it's okay from the mid. If you know what you're doing, you can have success. It's one of those weird heroes where it can feel like it does literally nothing in a game, but then it can also feel like if you spam Razor as a low MMR player, you could just solo win every game. It's just kind of at a weird spot. Winter Wyvern in a similar situation to Wind Ranger, not really a mid. These universal mids that are these range universal heroes are not good anymore. Wind Ranger, Winter Wyvern, Snapfire. Clinks, kind of griefing from the mid. You're just going to get dominated in lane. I mean, sure, at a low MMR, if you can just take advantage of the hero and have a good lane, you can own the game, but you're probably just going to get shit on, to be honest. Sniper, if you're going to pick the hero, you could pick a mid, maybe support. But again, honestly, I'm just going to put Sniper over here because I hate, it's viable. Like, it can work, but I hate it, and I don't want to see it in my games ever, so I'm actually putting it over in F tier. Stop picking this hero mid. Like, I would rather, I said it wasn't a carry. I'd rather you pick it as a carry, to be honest, even though I don't think it's good. Because when you pick this hero mid, you're griefing just like Alchemist, except you're way worse than Alchemist. And like, you do nothing once you get items. Like, you'll get items, but you still don't fight. At least Alchemist fights after he gets Blink and BKB and stuff. Then Keeper of the Light. Why are you going to pick this hero when you have all these other burst damage heroes that also right-click? Same thing with Tinker. It's just like more of a support now with the way that the spells work. I hate the new Tinker. It's very annoying because it just feels like it's awkward. They tried to force the support Tinker, and that's fine, but it just, I don't know, that's not really what the hero is. And then F tier, lastly, we have all the heroes that are just not mids. I mean, Sniper is just a bad hero. Don't pick it. Not a mid right now. Not a mid, not a mid, not a mid, not a mid. I mean, all these heroes are these like spell damagey kind of pseudo support mids that right now are just better as supports or just not good. And like all in a magic, no right click. Doesn't transition to the right click till too late. Just doesn't do the things that it used to with the spells. Again, more of a save hero, less of a like damaging hero. More of a support, does all the same things from support, doesn't need farm. So that's the same thing. A lot of these heroes are here, but the reason why I keep keeping them here in every tier list is because they have potential to become better if the patch changes. I don't think they're completely not mids at all. It's just that the patch is just not for them and hasn't been for a while in most cases. So that is my mid tier list for patch 7.37e. As always, guys, if you like the video, like, comment, and subscribe, all those kinds of things. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.